So it's not your fault if you're having conflict in a should I stay or go dynamic. It's not because you're a bad person or you picked the wrong person. It's because you haven't yet learned how the skills to become trigger proof and take these activations and turn them into deeper self-love and self-trust, and take these conflicts that you're going through and turn it into deeper intimacy. Hello and welcome to another trigger-proof transmission. I am your host, I guess, if you're following my channel. I'm your host, Dr. Nima Rahmani. I am a retired chiropractor who just found himself on a wild goose chase trying to figure out his relationship challenges and made a startling discovery, completely transformed my kind of view. Back in 2018, I created a possibility of leaving the confines of my practice to teach people exactly what causes their health issues, unknowingly going through my own relationship kind of challenges, healing knee deep with, immersed in a trauma bond, healing from that, creating a secure relationship, and now my karma is my dharma, which basically is teaching people how to heal from trauma bonds and create love that is secure. And the people who kind of are magnetized to my work, if you're listening and you're finding yourself, the algorithms have found you, is because you're wanting to take responsibility and ownership for becoming a container where secure relationships can thrive. Most people will go the therapy route and hear about how their ex is a narcissist and they're an empath and they're blameless and the other one is to blame. And most of the people who've come into my universe have already gone that route, seen that it doesn't actually work. And by work, I'm talking about it actually creates what we really want. We want love that's secure. We want to feel safe in a relationship where we feel seen and heard, with the capacity to have kind of like arguments or what are called ruptures and have the capacity to actually heal from them, right? And what I've discovered in helping people go from trauma bond, should I stay or go, relationship dynamics, which is what people usually are magnetized to my work because they're in that situation. Maybe they haven't even, you know, you might not have even admitted it to yourself, but you're wondering, should I stay or should I go? I want you to know that you're not alone. If you've been in that situation, you might have felt the frustration of actually going to a therapist, having your story rehashed again and again and again, and feeling validated. But here you are, not in a situation where you're magnetic to a secure relationship. And on the other side of a secure relationship, what you really want is polarity, right? You want to, if you're a woman, you want, in the feminine, you want to feel cherished. You want to feel held. You don't want to have to feel like you're leading. You know, you could be a boss babe at work and you're crushing it, which is great, but you don't want to have that same dynamic at home. You don't want to be controlling your man, telling him what to do, being in your masculine. And if you're a man, you don't want to feel like you're emasculated and constantly walking on eggshells and feeling like your efforts to provide and to protect and to, you know, give love are not respected and received. You want to feel like your provision is received and gratefully received and enthusiastically received. And you want your partner to really follow your lead in a secure dynamic where you have the capacity to actually repair from ruptures. But unfortunately, one of the things that were said on today's my academy in one of the group trainings was, after we finished the training, which I'm about to tell you, talk about this one specific thing that keeps coming up in conflict, criticism, defensiveness, which we're going to talk about. She said, I'm shocked that anyone can actually work. Any relationships actually work without the work I'm about to share with you. It's because of one thing, and one thing only, is because our shadows get activated when we're triggered. When we're activated, when you are in a relationship, you went into it oftentimes with the thought of like, it's a fantasy that I'm going to meet this person and they are not going to bring up any of my wounding. I'm going to feel, they're going to get rid of my insecurities and I'm not going to have to feel that again while being in this relationship. But unfortunately, what people realize very quickly is that relationships actually are designed. They don't know that they're designed, but I'm telling you right now, they're designed to bring up all of these woundings in an effort to repeat what was incomplete in childhood so that we have an opportunity to actually heal them. So it's not your fault if you're having conflict in a should I stay or go dynamic. It's not because you're a bad person or you picked the wrong person. It's because you haven't yet learned how the skills to become trigger proof and take these activations and turn them into deeper self-love and self-trust, and take these conflicts that you're going through and turn it into deeper intimacy. That's not a skill that you learned. I certainly didn't learn it. Unless you had unicorn parents who had a secure relationship, you probably have a blueprint of codependency, where you have one who's more of the narcissistic, kind of self-grandiose, parent, and then you have the other who's the codependent, who just kind of like fawns and completely subjugates. And so there's this back and forth push-pull dynamic that you can be raised in and think that that's just normal. So it's not your fault if you find yourself repeating these patterns and these cycles. And I'm here to tell you that there's a way out, and it's to master these specific skills of becoming trigger proof. So why do you get so triggered? What happens? Well, I want to share with you this process that I've kind of come up with. It's called dancing with your dark passenger. And I'm going to share it with you in hopes that you gain a little bit of insight as to why relationships feel frustrating to you and what we need to do if there's any hope for humanity, or if any chance of you developing a secure relationship. And here's the first one right here is I'm going to share. There's the ego, and then underneath the ego, basically, is the shadow. And the two together, the interplay with the two of these together, is what I call the dark passenger. And what is the dark passenger? Well, the dark passenger is a reference from Dexter, who was a lovely man, who was a cop, family guy, all this amazing thing, but he had this deep wound, this deep trauma from his past, which caused him to, murder people, want to murder people. But because he was a cop, he could actually channel that darkness, that murderous rage that he had from childhood, that was developed as a child from the trauma he witnessed. And he then, what he does is he finds actual murderers. And because he works for the police department, he could scope out and solve the mystery of who done it. And then instead of like reporting it and kind of arresting the person, he takes matters into his own hands and he murders them at every episode. So I'm a big fan. I'm sure, let me know if you've ever watched it, but essentially, Dexter had a dark, what he would call the dark passenger. And I love that. And I thought, wow, isn't that neat? We all have one as well. Maybe you might not be a murderer, but you react in your own way. So I'm going to explain to you why you get triggered and what's important to integrate. And I call it dancing with your dark passenger. Carl Jung labeled it as the shadow, this unwanted part of us. a part of us that we can't see, that we are denying that it's there, but we block with an identity, a mask we wear called the ego. So the best example of this I can give you is, think of a time when someone criticizes you and you get criticized. Immediately, there's this feeling, this sense of criticism that happens. You might notice yourself wanting to get defensive, or you're married to somebody or dating somebody who's exactly like this. So all of a sudden, there's a criticism or some sort of a feedback, like you're being impatient, you're not present. Let me give you an example. My wife will sometimes say, hey, you're not present with me. When I haven't integrated my shadow, I will take her feedback as criticism, immediately getting defensive and saying, no, I am. And then I'll go back to her and say, listen to all the times. Look at all the times today where we were playing. Does this not count? What about this? What about that? And then I'll get defensive in that moment. I'll be defensive, be like, what about this? Does it not count? Right? And because my shadow just got triggered. Only your shadows get triggered. That's the only reason why you're going to get triggered, is because your shadows just got activated. And so what the shadow is when she says a criticism, you're not being present, you're this, you're that, you're impatient, whatever, immediately there's a younger part of me that feels like I'm a failure, like I'm bad, like I'm in trouble. And this I'm bad part represents the shadow. So the shadow gets activated, I'm bad, and I don't like that part of me that's bad. I have been trying so hard all my life to not be bad, to not be this failure. I've created an identity of a successful person, a pleaser, a happy, whatever, perfectionistic ego, which is a mask, which is an identity. That's the ego part of the dark passenger, so that I don't have to deal with my shadow. And the interplay between back and forth between the ego and the shadow, the ego being the protector of the shadow, which is the wounded part of me that feels bad, not enough, fearing rejection. This interplay of the shadow being protected by the ego is what I call the dark passenger, is one of the greatest threats to our relationships. Think of a time, if you don't believe me, think of a time where you gave feedback and your partner got defensive. Easy to see in them, isn't it? But can you spot it in yourself? And there's the rub. There's the challenge of your dark passenger. Your dark passenger your shadow does not want to be revealed. It is well hidden, and this is why we call it our blind spot. Another name for this, the shadow, also, we can also call it our blind spot. We have blind spots. I'm just going to use my little tool here. We have a blind spot. It's also in our blind spot. The blind spot is the area of our psyche, like our defensive part, the part of us that gets defensive because we don't want to see or feel and acknowledge our I'm a failure part. So because of that, whether you're with your child, whether you're with your partner, our shadows get activated. We don't feel like we're good enough. So then our protective ego parts come up and defend. Say, no, I'm not, you are. And that interplay is the greatest threat to a secure relationship. It's easy to spot somebody else's shadow, isn't it? But the problem is our blind spots don't lend to us seeing it within ourselves. And our ego blocks it. And we say, no, I'm not. I know you are, but what am I? We block it. And that is the hallmark of our narcissism. And we all have an inner Kanye, an inner Donald Trump. And if you tell me, no, I'm not, no, I don't, that's your shadow. That's your dark passenger, because you're full of shit. So this is the kind of fun we have in our Cycle Breakers Academy, because this is a cycle that happens, and because you're denying its presence, you will react, you will defend, and you'll judge back, and then you'll defend the other person. You'll say, no, I'm not, you are, and then their shadow gets activated. And their ego will then block it and say, no, I'm not. And then it will cause them to want to block themselves from feeling not enough. Then their reaction will then trigger our shadow even deeper. And now we have what's called the infinite loop of conflict. And so this interplay, this lack of ability to what we call integrate, to bring back, to bring forth these darker parts of ourselves, this lack of ability is a real great threat to our relationships. And when we don't learn how to become trigger proof and bring those parts home, then we completely react. We feel unseen. We feel unheard. The home does not feel like a sanctuary. It becomes a battlefield. And then guess what? You pass that down to your children. Think of a time where you felt invalidated by your parents, and that's what we're doing to our children. And this whole cycle, which then activates their shadow, which then creates an ego defense, and then sets them up for relationships that are just as insecure as ours. And a secure bond happens when we learn how to uncover our blind spots willingly, to surrender to them, to humble ourselves, to drop the inner Kanye, inner Donald Trump, and learn how to take conflict and turn it into deeper intimacy. Because once you get this right, you see that the other person isn't actually criticizing you. They're actually making a bid for connection with you. Every criticism comes from their own desire or fear of not having a bond with you. But you can't see that because you're too busy defending yourself from your own shadow. And this is why conflict repair is so challenging. And so you can go to a therapist's office and just hash it out. And that's why many people, many of our students, after they're done their counseling, couples counseling, they actually feel worse, because what they discover, you know, we know that they don't like that. That's why we don't do therapy. We actually, in our academy, we actually do training. You don't need therapy. You need training. You need training to learn how to uncover your blind spots and be willing and be humble to own them. And when you do, you become a safe and secure partner, regardless of what your partner's doing or saying, because you no longer see their feedback as criticism anymore, because you've stopped criticizing yourself. And this is how to become trigger proof. This is literally why you get so defensive, because your shadows are being activated. And we know, like I know that, you know, based on the feedback that I get in the emails, that you don't want to be in relationships that are in constant conflict, when you have to walk on eggshells to the point where you're like, should I stay or go? Or maybe you've even left and you're broken up and you're like, I don't want to repeat this pattern. There's good news. You don't have to. You can learn the skills in becoming trigger proof. And so what happens every month in my academy, I create an event called the Overview Experience, where I open it up to the public to really see exactly what the process looks like. It's a path. It's a process. And we aren't meant to do it alone. We're meant to do it in a community. And it's a 6-hour live event on Zoom, where what I do is we take your greatest conflict that you're dealing with right now, or in a past conflict, you're in a should I stay or go situation, or you've broken up, you're heartbroken, and you want to master these skills so that you become a master of repair and you become the secure partner. You start attracting higher level people because you're magnetic, because your status has gone up, because you're not a victim constantly, and your self-trust deepens, self-worth is realized. You upgrade your self-worth so you become more magnetic. It's in the mastery of these skills. And I open it up for 10 people or 10 couples who are really at their wits' end, and they're sick and tired of the therapy game and trying to be validated. And it's people who are like, look, none of us are bad people. We just haven't been equipped with the skills. It's not our fault. You want to learn exactly how to take that space between stimulus and response and expand it so that you can choose your outcome from a high value place rather than from a wound. I see you. I'd love to meet you there. That's at the upcoming overview experience. I'm going to drop a link for 10 people, lucky folks, who are going to master this methodology. And for the first 5 that sign up, I like to gift them with a one-to-one integration call afterwards where I do an intuitive kind of energetic reading off of an assessment of their conflict and a path moving forward. So I offer that for the first 5 to jump in, and we are just a few spots left. And I'm really delighted to work with those people who want to take responsibility, not blame, want to get past their poor me victim story and take ownership and raise their status so that they're not attracting narcissistic types, the hero God complex. Because if you go in as a damsel in distress or a victim and telling about your crazy ex, you're going to attract a hero type to rescue you who's going to turn into your next perpetrator. So for those who are ready to transform that story, the first step is the overview experience, and it is a 6-hour event that is like 25 years of therapy with the insights and revelations that you get. And I look forward to guiding my community through that each month. It's something I look forward to, and I love opening it up to guests to see if they're ready. Let me know what came up for you on this. Send me a DM. Let me know your background, your situation, see if this is right for you. Tell me what you discovered on this. What's your biggest takeaway? What questions you have, because I'm really keen on educating people. My goal is 1 million families transformed because they took responsibility to learn the skills they never did so that they don't pass these toxic patterns onto the next generation. See you at the next perfect time. My name is Dr. Nima Rahmani, and you've been listening to the Trigger Proof, designed to teach you the most important skill necessary for a dramatically changing world, which is nervous system regulation. And becoming trigger proof doesn't mean trigger less. It means learning how to regulate ourselves to bring us back to center so that we can then be governed by our purpose rather than from our wounds. Anytime there's reactivity, there's a wound. And if you're curious and inspired to learn more, join us at Breathwork and Badassery or the overview experience. There's a difference between listening to a podcast and actually showing up live and doing the work with a badass community who's all about breaking cycles of intergenerational trauma. It didn't start with you, but it can end with you if you're willing to do the work. See you at the next perfect time. Make sure you subscribe.